Hello everyone, happy Full Friday. Today we're going to be visiting with our weanlings here. So we'll see these guys as they come in for their lunch. They've spent the whole day out in their paddock, playing with one another. They're getting ready to come up into the barn. Then they come up in the barn twice a day. They spend the rest of the time outside. They will spend the night outside. These guys were born in January and February, so they're the oldest foals we have on the farm. So as you can see, we finished weaning in this barn. These guys settled right into their weanling life. So one thing that helps with that is all these foals, as I mentioned, they were born in January and February. So they're all around the same age. They're all in the same developmental stages. So these guys have been together since they were born. So even when their dams left, they went to our second mare facility. These foals stayed with the horses they've known all their lives. So that really helps ease them into their weanling life. They keep the same routine. They're here on this farm. This is where they were born, on a nursery farm. And as they come up, we'll get a little treat for coming to the gate. This is a Pioneer the Nile filly out of Annie Minnie. We have another Pioneer the Nile, this one out of I'm a Looker. And this is a Good Magic colt out of a mare named Storm and Maggie, who's a half to a Fleet Alex. So we do have a mix of colts and fillies in this field. These guys will stay in this mixed group up until they leave this farm. So these foals are born on a nursery farm. Our foaling season is between January and May. Once all the foals are born, right around this time of the year, in June and July is when we start to wean. So our oldest foals are now 5 to 6 months of age. It's when weaning occurs. And the mares will travel to our second mare facility. We'll be going to that farm next week. So if you want to tune in next week, we'll go for a drive of our Matriarchs and Maidens farm. Here, Max the Barn Cat is making an appearance as well. And these foals will stay here. And they'll stay on this farm until the yearling farm is empty. So the yearlings will typically sell in the fall, either at Fasig-Tipton or Keeneland sales. And those that we keep will go down to our training center in Ocala. Once that yearling farm is empty, these foals will travel to the yearling farm. Then a few months later, the mares will start to return to this farm, and we get ready for the 2020 breeding season. So it's kind of a circle of life between all the farms. And we have several horses in our program that have gone through all of the stages, that have been on all the farms. So I mentioned Good Magic, that foal we saw that last went by was by Good Magic. So he was born right here on this farm. He traveled to our yearling farm. He went to the Keeneland September sale. He sold for $1 million. We stayed in as partners with E5 Racing. He went down to our training center in Ocala. Of course, he was the champion 2-year-old in 2017. He won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He also won the Haskell Stakes and the Bluegrass as a 3-year-old. Now he's standing at Ocala Stud, where he's alongside Curlin, as well as a few other stallions in our program. McLean's Music, Kentharos. Those are stallions that we are affiliated with. So we don't stand any stallions on our properties. We just have the mares and the foals. Our mares will travel to the stallions when they're bred. Then they'll return to the farm shortly after. About 2 weeks later is when we start checking those mares for pregnancy. Once we know that the mare is in foal, we can count forward by 11 months. That's her average equine gestation period. And that's how we can estimate when the foals are going to be born the next year. So we range all the mares by their estimated foaling groups. Then you get these groups of foals that are all born around the same time. As I mentioned, these guys will stay together. They've got some comfort with one another. We're in our yearling prep at the moment over at the yearling farm, getting ready for the sales. It's a Curlin colt out of La Passionata. It's a colt out of Cowboy Take Me Away. It's a half-2 Hot Dixie chick. It's a colt out of Essentially. Give me a second to recognize his little face marking. So yeah, these guys are very quiet. So as I mentioned, this is their routine. They do this every day. So they're very used to being handled. They've been handled pretty regularly since they were born. When they go in, we'll run our hands down their legs, check to make sure they haven't picked up any bumps or scrapes while they're out in the paddock. We also take their temperatures. They'll get a little bit of grain. They'll stay in the barn for just a little bit, then they'll come right back out to their paddocks. Now, they don't stay in the barn overnight. They will go back out. The only time they'll stay in is if there's a serious storm in the forecast. But it's for the best for them at this stage for them to be out most of the day. We have this beautiful paddock with all these hills for them to run up and down. They can spend time together, they can play. This is what will help them build strong muscles and bones. Hi. So Cantharos colt out of Galabout Town is this chestnut guy. This is a Medaglia d'Oro out of Comedy. It's a colt. And who is our last one hiding in the back? That's a Curlin colt out of Winding Way. Winding Way is a full sister to Kauai Katie, who race in the Stone Street stables. So the bucket over here I can show you. It's just a little bit of the grain that they'll get when they go inside. Just a little incentive for them to come up, and a treat for them to remind them of their routine. And the mares in our broodmare band, they're a combination of mares that race in our racing stable and came to retire to the band, and mares that we purchased. So we have one Justify foal this year. We have a Justify filly out of a mare named Bella Jolie. Bella Jolie is most known as the dam of Run Happy. And she is one of the very few bay Justify foals that I've seen. She's bay and she's got a tiny little bit of white on her forehead. A flashy chestnut. That's the Galabout Town colt. He's by Cantharos. And she herself is very flashy. She's got a big white face and those white stockings. So he gets that from mom. Cantharos is the chestnut as well, but he doesn't have quite as much white. Max is over here showing off. So Curlin doesn't live on this farm. He stands over at Hillendale. We don't house our stallions on our farms. So we don't have any arrogant foals this year, but we had one last year. He's a colt out of Missile Bay, so that makes him a half-2 Terra Promessa. It's a graded stakes winner. Terra Promessa herself had her first foal this year. She had a colt by Into Mischief. Oh good, he's found a clump of grass to play with. He has a sister in this barn named Lola. We may see in a little bit. So all of the barns here, we have barn cats. Just helps us keep them mice free. We'll follow these guys up to the barn. I should have mentioned at the beginning, my name is Hillary. If you guys have any questions, you can feel free to ask. So I'll go in and we'll see these guys in their stalls briefly. So there is a second field of weanlings, but you know, they don't always remember their routine. So the second field are all the way down that hill. So he did not lose his tail, Max the barn cat. He was born that way. So just genetics. Then he was born with a short tail. His sister has a short tail as well. So this is the Chardonnay barn, barn 1. We have 5 barns on our nursery property. And all of them are named after wine varieties. So Chardonnay, this is the home to our January and February foals. We'll go in and we can see these guys up in their stalls, eating away in the grain. This is the Good Magic Storm and Maggie colt. The cat has a sister, Wendy. Gal about town. So you can see up at the top of their stalls here, we've got their stall cards. So this has information on both the mare and the foals. So they will get a new card that has just the foal information. So this is essentially his foal. He's as you can see, he's a dark bear brown colt by Hardspun. You see his birthday there in February. We go over to the next stall. So he was born just 5 days after this comedy colt. So when I say they were born relatively close to one another, I mean it. They all have very close birthdays. So that helps that they're all around the same size and they're in those same developmental stages. But even so, we don't take all the mares out at once. So we don't wean the entire group. We'll do it slowly and gradually. And we'll usually leave a few of the more even-tempered mares behind to act as guides, kind of nannies for the foals that stay. And we do weaning based on the health and the independence on the individual horses. So if they need a little bit more time with mom, it's not a hard cutout date at 5 to 6 months of age, we tailor it to the individual horse. That's the same with all of our programs. So not every horse will get the same amount of feed. You have to make sure that these horses are maturing into the best versions of themselves. So I'll end here with a shot of this last field. So we wean at age 5 to 6 months. And again, we do that based on the individual horse, always taking their health and happiness into consideration. So maybe you can see off in the distance, that's that second group of weanlings. Decided they want to spend a little bit more time in their paddock today. So do you all have any other questions before I wrap up? You can see these fields are nice and big. They're about 20-30 acres. Never have more than 10 mares in their foals in a particular paddock. And some of them that are smaller will have fewer. Just make sure we're not overloading the paddocks. So we sell a different number of yearlings each year. It just depends on the market and the number of foals that we have. We have about an average of 80 foals a year. We'll typically sell, the majority of those foals will be entered, and it just depends on the number that we sell will depend on the market. Sometimes the nanny mare will let some of the foals nurse. We had a mare named My Wandy's Girl who was sweet enough that she did let a few of the other foals in the paddock nurse from her. But it's not very common. That was pretty atypical. She just had a really lovely personality. So the mares are not on this farm. This group of mares are not on this farm. They're at our second mare facility, our Matriarchs and Maidens farm. As I mentioned, we'll do a tour of that farm next week. So if you all want to check in, we can drive around and see some of the mares that have traveled there from this farm. So thank you guys so much for joining me. If you had any questions I didn't get to, you can send me a message. And we'll save our tour to our Instagram TV page as well as our Facebook page. And you can see the tours that we've done prior on our Facebook page as well as our YouTube channel. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope to see you all next week.